13.4% of young Americans locked out of their very first job. On Live TV, Jasmine Crockett ripped into Donald Trump and accused him of creating the worst job market since the 1980s. The chamber shook as graduates in caps and gowns screamed, waving rejection letters in the air while Trump called them lazy. For 23 seconds, America witnessed a clash so raw, so brutal, it felt like history cracking open in real time. But the question is, whose future just collapsed, Trump's or an entire generation's? Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. To broadcast cut in, flooding every screen in America with a single image, to Capitol Chamber, packed wall to wall with Gen Z graduates. They weren't smiling, they weren't celebrating. Their gowns were creased, their eyes hollowed, their hands trembling as they held resumes stamped again and again with one word: rejected. The air was suffocating, the kind of silence that crushed your chest. You could feel a storm waiting to detonate. Then she rose, Jasmine Crockett, her chair scraped against the marble floor like a warning shot. In her hand, a folder, slim, sharp, stamped with the insignia of the Richmond Fed. She didn't ease into her words, she unleashed them like fire. 13.4% unemployment among new graduates. The worst since the 1980s. Under your watch, Mr. Trump. Gasps rippled. The camera swung to Trump. He smirked, lips curling in disdain, leaning back as though bored by a child's tantrum. He muttered into the microphone, "Fake news." His Republican allies burst out laughing, a cruel, hollow chorus that ricocheted off the chamber walls. Some clapped, mocking, as if Jasmine had told a bad joke. Their laughter sliced through the silence, stabbing into the hearts of the graduates watching from above. Faces tightened, fingers clenched around the resumes, veins rising on pale knuckles. But Jasmine didn't blink. She lifted the folder higher, shaking it so every lens, every viewer at home could see. Her voice thundered, steady and merciless. These are not rumors. These are facts, Federal Reserve data, cold numbers written in ink that you cannot erase. These young Americans behind me are not lazy, they are not entitled. They are victims of your failed policies, victims of your reckless economy. Their futures have been stolen, and you sit here laughing at them. The chamber's mood snapped, the chuckles faltered. Cameras caught students shifting in their seats, whispers swelling into a hum of rage. One girl in the front row gripped a rejection letter so tightly the paper tore in her hand. A beau's eyes filled with tears, but his jaw locked in defiance. Trump's grin slipped for a fraction of a second, his hand tightening on the desk, knuckles white. He tried to wave her off. Excuses, always excuses. His voice cracked on the last word, betraying a flash of unease. Jasmine stepped closer, eyes burning, voice dropping to a blade's edge. Look them in the eyes, Mr. Trump. Look at every graduate in this room, everyone watching at home, and tell them they are worthless. Tell them they don't matter. Tell them their future means nothing. The room froze, time seemed to stall, the graduates leaned forward, America leaned in. For one suspended moment, the world waited. Would Trump's denial hold, or was this the moment the truth finally pierced his armor? Can raw truth shatter a wall built on lies, or will a generation's stolen future be silenced once again? For a moment the chamber was still, the silence cold tight after Jasmine's words, but then a sound cracked through the air, a chair scraping back. A young man in the gallery stood on trembling legs, his graduation cap dangling from his hand. His voice quivered at first, but it carried through the microphones as the cameras locked on his face, magnified for millions watching at home. 87 applications, he said, lifting a stack of papers that looked heavier than stone. 87 times I've begged for work. And not one job. His throat tightened, his eyes glistened. A tear streaked down his cheek and the cameras drank in every drop. He wasn't acting, he was the evidence, the raw wound of a broken economy. The chamber stirred like a restless beast. Reporters in the press box leaned forward, pens scratching furiously, whispers darting from seat to seat. A senator shook his head slowly, another murmured under his breath. On the Democratic side, heads nodded, faces drawn with solemn recognition. They knew this story wasn't unique, it was the story of an entire generation. But on the Republican benches, smirks twisted into irritation, fingers drummed impatiently on polished wood. Jasmine turned, her arm outstretched, pointing not just to the young man but to every student in the gallery. Her voice thundered like a judge delivering a verdict. "This is America's future, and you, Mr. Trump, call them lazy." Her words cracked like a whip. The gallery erupted in applause, a desperate, angry cheer from those who had no other weapon but their voices. Trump's face flushed red, his composure snapping like glass. He slammed his hand against the desk and shouted, his voice echoing like a hammer on steel, "They are lazy." The words ricocheted across the chamber, searing into every ear. The audience gasped, a collective intake of breath so sharp it felt like the entire building recoiled. Some students shouted back, some sobbed openly, their pain broadcast live to millions. The tension spiked to a breaking point, every camera angle capturing the exact moment a president chose to spit on the struggles of his nation's youth. Jasmine's eyes narrowed, her fists tightening at her side. She didn't shout this time. Her voice dropped low, venomous, controlled, the kind of tone that could cut deeper than any scream. "You dare insult them?" These young people built their lives through a pandemic, sat in virtual classrooms while the world collapsed, only to graduate into rejection and debt. "And you stand there, laughing, branding them failures." Her words slashed to silence, each syllable heavier than the last. The young man in the gallery raised his voice again. Louder now, steadier, fueled by Jasmine's fury. "We are not lazy, we are fighting every day for a chance you took from us." His words rang through the chamber, setting the crowd ablaze. Students rose one after another, their voices layering into a storm. Stories of rejection, desperation, despair. Trump leaned forward, gripping the edge of his desk so hard his knuckles blanched. His eyes darted nervously toward the cameras as if realizing too late that his words had just been carved into history. The chamber pulsed with rage, the kind that no denial could smother. How far will Trump go in mocking America's youth before the chamber, and the nation, turns on him completely? The moment Trump spat the word lazy into the chamber, Jasmine moved. She strode to the center of the room, the Richmond Fed report clutched like a weapon. With a single motion, she slammed it down onto the desk so hard the microphones popped with static, the sound cracking through the air like a gunshot. Pages fanned across the wood, charts and numbers spilling into plain sight under the blinding lights. Gasps rippled, the camera zoomed in tight, framing the hard black ink that told a story no smirk could erase. Jasmine's voice rose above the chaos, sharp and unwavering, slicing through the clamor of gasps and mutters. "These numbers are not rumors, not excuses, not spin. They are the ledger of your failure. You gutted youth job programs, stripped away training funds, slashed every ladder that might have lifted these young people up, and left them to fall into the abyss. You abandoned an entire generation, and tonight the world is watching you laugh at their pain." The GOP benches erupted in protest, voices barking for order, demanding her microphone be cut. The chairman leaned forward, gavel pounding, but Jasmine refused to yield. She leaned into the mic, her voice rising louder with each syllable until it drowned out the pounding wood and partisan jeers. "This isn't fake news, this is a national betrayal. Every single chart, every rejected resume, every tear in this gallery is proof that you failed these people. And no switch, no gavel, no order will silence me tonight." Her words thundered, shaking the chamber like a tremor. The gallery erupted into cheers, students stood, clapping, some shouting through tears, their voices raw, unpolished, but powerful enough to rattle the marble pillars. A chant swelled, shaky at first, then surging into a roar. "We are not lazy, we are not lazy." The sound carried, defiant and unstoppable, as if the voices of a generation had finally been unleashed. The gallery erupted into cheers, students stood, clapping, some shouting through tears, their voices raw, unpolished, but powerful enough to rattle the marble pillars. A chant swelled, shaky at first, then surging into a roar. "We are not lazy, we are not lazy." The sound carried, defiant and unstoppable, as if the voices of a generation had finally been unleashed. Reporters scrambled to capture the moment, cameras sweeping from Jasmine's blazing eyes to the sea of students on their feet, fists raised, rejection letters waving like battle flags. Trump's jaw tightened, his knuckles gripping the desk, but his smirk had vanished. He shouted over the din, his words almost lost in the storm, "Order, this is a disgrace. You're making a mockery of this institution," but no one listened. Even some members of his own party shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their eyes darting toward the cameras that were now broadcasting a very different picture than Trump had planned. Jasmine pointed directly at Trump, her finger like a dagger. "You don't get to dismiss them, not anymore. Their voices are louder than your lies, their truth stronger than your denial. Tonight, you will face the reckoning you tried to bury." The room quaked with noise, the barrier between order and rebellion crumbling. For the first time, Trump looked less like the master of the stage and more like a man cornered under the weight of a truth too big to silence. Is this the moment the chamber turns, not just against Trump's words, but against Trump himself? The chamber was still roaring with chants when Trump surged to his feet, slamming both hands onto the desk so hard the microphone squealed. His face flushed crimson, his voice booming like a cannon. "I made America great," he bellowed, spittle flashing in the lights. "I rebuilt the economy. I gave this nation strength. And you," he jabbed a finger across the room at Jasmine, "you're just a rookie no one even knew before Congress. You should be thanking me for the stage you're standing on." The insult cracked through the room like lightning, gasps scattered. The GOP's side erupted in applause, stomping feet, pounding fists on desks as if trying to will Trump's authority back into existence. Their cheers sounded more desperate than triumphant, a chorus clinging to an empire that was crumbling in real time, but Jasmine didn't flinch. She leaned into her microphone, eyes locked on Trump with the unblinking stare of a predator who had just found blood. Her reply cut through the uproar like steel through fabric. "At least I fight for people, not for your ego." The room shook again, this time from Democrats pounding the table, their applause like a drumline backing her words. The students in the gallery erupted into chants of her name. "James Mai. James Mai." Trump's jaw clenched tighter, his knuckles bone white as he tried to shout over the frenzy, but before he could launch his next barrage, a new figure leapt into the fray. Jim Jordan sprang from his seat, his voice cracking with fury as he pointed across the aisle. "This is disgraceful. You don't get to disrespect the president like this. This chamber is not your circus." But Jasmine spun on him so fast it froze him mid-sentence. Her voice, low but sharp as a razor's edge, sliced into the room. "Sit down, Jim. You care more about saving Trump's skin than saving jobs. You've turned your back on the very people who put you here. You're not defending America. You're protecting a sinking ship." The words detonated. Gasps rolled across the chamber, and for the first time, Jordan faltered. His mouth hung open, his face drained of color as the chamber's camera zoomed in mercilessly, broadcasting his humiliation to millions watching at home. Laughter broke out from the Democratic side, but it wasn't mocking, it was incredulous, the sound of watching a titan stripped bare in front of the nation. Trump tried to regain the floor, but his voice was drowned out by the swelling noise. The gallery erupted again, students cheering, reporters leaning forward, scribbling furiously. The momentum that had once been Trump's weapon now swung entirely to Jasmine, her words piercing through the chamber like arrows, leaving wounds too visible to deny. She didn't smile, she didn't even blink. She simply let the silence after her strike settle like smoke after an explosion, her presence commanding every pair of eyes. Trump and Jordan looked suddenly smaller, their voices reduced to static against the rising tide of youth anger and public outrage. Will the GOP hold its fragile line behind Trump, or is Jasmine's firestorm the spark that tears their unity apart before the nation's eyes? The gavel struck, the noise simmer, and into the storm stepped John O'Traccoon, the Richmond-fed economist whose data Jasmine had just unleashed like a weapon. His suit was crisp but his voice carried the weight of numbers that no applause or insult could erase. Adjusting his glasses, he leaned into the microphone, every word deliberate, every syllable carrying the authority of cold truth. The data is clear. 13.4% of July's unemployed were new entrants into the labor force. The majority are recent graduates with no prior experience. This is the highest rate since the early 1980s. These figures are not partisan, they are fact. The chamber rippled with tension, reporters scribbled like mad, cameras zoomed on charts displayed behind him, glowing blue and red lines cutting across decades. The weight of history was undeniable. Students in the gallery leaned forward, eyes wide, as if watching their lives finally quantified on the record. For a moment, the silence felt reverent, until Trump shattered it like glass. He lurched into his microphone, his voice dripping with scorn. "This man is nothing more than a Biden puppet. Another academic hack reading whatever script the Democrats handed him. His words echoed, meant to rally his allies, but instead they landed sour, brittle, desperate. Gasps cut through the chamber. Even some GOP members shifted uncomfortably, aware the cameras were still rolling, aware the accusation sounded more like panic than strength. Jasmine seized the opening like a predator pouncing on prey. She leaned forward, her fingers stabbing the air, her voice sharp and unyielding. "You can insult me, you can insult him, but you cannot erase the numbers. These charts, this data, the rejection letters flooding the hands of these graduates, they tell a story that no insult, no slogan, no fake bravado can bury. You failed them, Mr. Trump, and tonight, the truth has walked into this chamber and cornered you." The chamber trembled, not from applause but from something deeper, a shift in air, a sense that Trump's grip was slipping. Then, as if on cue, the gallery erupted. At first a murmur, then a roar, voices layering into one unstoppable chant. "Jobs, jobs, jobs." The sound surged like a wave, rolling over the chamber, swallowing the jeers of the GOP, rattling the marble columns and shaking the cameras. The chant thundered louder with each repetition, a demand no politician could ignore. Trump shouted into his microphone, his face red, his words almost drowned out. "Order, order, this is a disgrace," but the chant only grew stronger, shaking the very bones of the Capitol. Students pounded the gallery railings, their resumes waving like banners of war. Jasmine stood perfectly still, letting the chant roll over her, her eyes locked on Trump, her silence more devastating than any scream. The spectacle was no longer about policy. It had become a battle for legitimacy, a duel between denial and truth, arrogance and evidence, one man's pride against the fury of a generation. Trump's voice cracked again, straining to be heard, but every syllable was smothered by the relentless rhythm of young voices demanding their future back. If the chamber itself now beats to the sound of jobs, 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 can Trump silence the truth, or is this the moment his wall of denial finally crumbles under the weight of an entire generation? The chants rattled the chamber, the sound of jobs, 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 beating like war drums, when Trump suddenly snapped. His face, crimson under the glare of the cameras, twisted into rage. He slammed his palm against the desk, the microphone shrieking with feedback as his voice tore through the chaos. "Jasmine, you're nothing but a loudmouth puppet, a nobody. A prop for the Democrats, parroting whatever script they shove in front of you. You're a disgrace to this chamber and a fraud to the American people." The insult cracked through the air, raw and venomous. Gasps erupted from every corner. Students stiffened, reporters froze mid-sentence, Democrats surged with anger. Even some Republicans flinched, realizing the cameras were capturing every syllable in unforgiving high definition. The insult was not just aimed at Jasmine, it was aimed at every voice rising against him. But Jasmine did not flinch, she didn't recoil or shout over him. Instead, she stepped forward, her shoulders squared, her gaze locked like a blade against his. Her voice was steady, low, and cold, the kind of tone that cuts deeper than rage. "And you, sir, are a washed-up conman afraid of a black woman with a spine." The chamber detonated. Gasps collided with shouts, a thunderclap of disbelief and electricity that rolled across the floor like shockwaves. The gallery erupted. Some students screamed in triumph, others stood frozen, their hands over their mouths. The GOP benches roared with fury, Republicans shouting for her words to be stricken from the record. The chairman's gavel pounded, but the noise was swallowed by the chaos. Reporters scrambled, their phones lighting up as headlines were written in real time. Crockett calls Trump a conman on Live TV. Black woman with a spine. Crockett strikes stuns chamber. Social media feeds exploded, hashtags surging into the millions within minutes. Hashtag conman, hashtag spy, and hashtag Crockett vs Trump lit up screens across the country. Memes already flying before Trump could even form his next word. Trump's face drained from red to pale, his mouth opening and closing as if searching for oxygen. He tried to shout back, but the words stuck, smothered by the roar of a chamber that had just witnessed a line no one thought anyone would dare cross. His power, built on insults and dominance, had been shattered in an instant, not by volume, but by precision. Jasmine didn't smile, didn't revel in the chaos. Her eyes stayed locked on him, steady and unblinking, her silence louder than any applause. She had landed the sharpest blow of the night, one that wasn't just political, it was personal, cultural, historical. A black woman staring down a former president and branding him a fraud on live television, before the eyes of millions. The nation felt it, the chamber knew it, but as the uproar swelled higher, one question cut through the frenzy like a whisper carried on fire. Had Jasmine Crockett just crossed the line that could break her? Or was this the exact strike America needed to finally shatter Donald Trump's myth? The chamber had barely recovered from Jasmine's thunderous strike when the gallery erupted. A single voice cut through the stunned silence: "Our future is not for sale." And within seconds it multiplied into a chorus. Dozens of students rose from their seats, banners unfurled like battle flags, their words stark under the blinding lights. "We are not lazy, our future is not for sale." Their chants pounded the marble walls, echoing like war drums across the chamber, drowning out the chairman's frantic gavel. Republican lawmakers shot to their feet in outrage, their voices cracking as they demanded order. "Remove them. Remove them now." Security moved toward the gallery, their black uniforms slicing through the crowd, but Jasmine's voice ripped through the chamber before the first officer could climb the stairs. "They are not trespassers. They are America's foes." Her words froze the moment, the cameras swinging back to her, capturing the fire in her eyes as she stood like a shield between power and protest. The students cheered louder, stamping their feet, turning the chamber floor into a drumbeat of defiance. Trump sneered, his face twisted with disdain, his microphone sparking as he leaned in. "They should be working, not whining." His words, sharp and venomous, cut straight through the cheers and detonated. The gallery erupted in boos so deafening that even the walls seemed to shake. Students jeered, some waving their rejection letters high, others pointing down at him with fury etched into their young faces. Millions at home saw it, a president mocked openly on live TV, the jeers of a generation drowning out the last shreds of his authority. The GOP benches erupted in chaos, lawmakers shouting at Jasmine, blaming her for inciting a riot. The chairman's gavel pounded helplessly, lost beneath the tidal wave of sound. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras flashing, commentators whispering into their mix as history unfolded in real time. The chamber was no longer just a hearing, it had become an arena, a battlefield of voices where the old guard and the new clashed without restraint. Jasmine raised her hand for silence, and slowly, impossibly, the chants dimmed just enough for her voice to cut through. "You hear that, Mr. Trump? That is not noise. That is a generation you abandoned. That is the sound of America's future, screaming to be heard. And tonight, no gavel, no threat, no insult will silence them." Her words were steady, resolute, her tone carrying the weight of defiance and the rhythm of destiny. Trump slammed his hand against the desk again, veins bulging, his face livid as he tried to retake control. But the image was already seared into the nation's memory. The leader mocked, the students united, the congresswoman standing tall amid chaos like a general at the front lines. The chamber was no longer under his command. But could Jasmine seize this storm and harness it, or would the uprising spiral into a chaos even she could not control? The chants still thunder in the rafters, and Jasmine reached under her desk and pulled out a stack of charts as thick as a trial record. She spread them wide across the table, her hands deliberate, her eyes blazing as she turned to the cameras. Screens flickered alive, broadcasting graphs that cut like knives, lines of red climbing higher and higher. Long-term unemployment at its worst in years. Bars frozen in place. Corporate hiring stalled. Jagged curves sagging. Wages stagnant. Numbers no slogan could smother. The chamber gasped as the images lit up the monitors behind her, each chart an indictment sharper than words. Trump barked over the visuals, his voice cracking with fury. "Lies, all lies. Don't believe these charts. They're cherry-picked propaganda." He waved his hands wildly, trying to block the sightlines, but the cameras didn't follow him. They stayed fixed on the evidence, zooming closer to the red lines crawling across the screen like open wounds on America's economy. His shouting, once commanding, now looked small against the cold immensity of data glowing in high definition. A murmur rippled through the press box, one reporter leaned toward another, his pen frozen in midair. "This is the new 1980s recession replayed," he whispered, his voice trembling at the weight of the comparison. The words spread like electricity, whispered again and again. Anchors on live feeds repeated it instantly, news tickers flashing the phrase across millions of screens. The narrative was no longer Trump's to spin. Jasmine seized the momentum, like a conductor commanding an orchestra. She pointed directly at the charts, her voice a steady drumbeat cutting through the tension. History is repeating itself. We are standing at the edge of another lost decade. But this time, we will not be silent. We will not let another generation be crushed by arrogance, denial, and greed. Her words layered over the images, turning cold graphs into moral fire. Students in the gallery stood again, fists raised, their chants now syncopated with her words, as if the data itself had given their anger a rhythm. Trump's face glistened with sweat. He pounded the desk with his fist, his microphone screeching with feedback. Fake, fake, you think anyone believes this garbage? But the more he screamed, the more his voice was swallowed by the cold authority of the visuals, undeniable, unspinnable, the numbers marching across screens like soldiers of truth. Cop lawmakers shouted with him, but even their eyes betrayed unease, darting nervously toward the cameras, aware that every second was carving their complicity into history. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her silence between each phrase was louder than their shouting. She pointed to the sea of students standing in the gallery, their faces shining with sweat and fury under the lights. Look at them, Mr. Trump. They are not statistics. They are not no's. They are the faces behind these lines, the voices behind these numbers. And no wall of denial will erase them tonight. The chamber fell into a strange, electric silence, not calm, but charged, waiting for the next strike, as if the very air knew a point of no return had just been crossed. If history is now Jasmine's weapon, cutting deeper than insults ever could, will Trump survive a battle where the enemy is not her voice, but the truth of time itself? The chamber buzzed with the weight of the charts still glowing on the monitors when Jim Jordan shot from his seat like a man possessed. His face was flushed, his voice a raw bark as he jabbed a finger toward Jasmine. "This is a circus," he shouted, spit catching the light. "This is nothing but a sham trial staged by the Democrats to humiliate a former president. You're turning the people's house into your own theater of lies." His words ricocheted around the room, desperate, furious, but also hollow, the cries of a man who felt the ground slipping beneath him. Jasmine didn't blink. She didn't even raise her voice. She simply turned toward him with the slow precision of a predator narrowing in on prey, her hand tightening around the microphone. When she finally spoke, her tone was razor-sharp, cutting the air clean in half. "No, Jim, this isn't a circus. This is your reckoning." The chamber gasped, and the silence that followed made her words feel heavier, like stones dropped into a still lake. Jordan tried to interject again, but Jasmine didn't give him the space to breathe. She advanced, her words slashing through the chamber with surgical precision. "You have the nerve to call this a show, while back in your district families are burying dreams under piles of rejection letters. Your constituents are lining up at food banks, their kids are working minimum wage jobs with college degrees in hand. And you stand here defending Trump's pride instead of defending them." The blow landed. Gasps turned into murmurs, reporters scribbled furiously, cameras zoomed in to capture every flicker of panic on Jordan's face. Jasmine pressed harder, her eyes locked on him like a hawk zeroing in on its target. "You've ignored your own people, you've abandoned their voices. Tonight, the only circus here is the one you and your party created, protecting a calm man while the country burns." The students in the gallery roared their approval, stamping their feet until the marble floor seemed to tremble. Their chants of shame, shame, shame rose in waves, drowning out Jordan's sputtering protests. His face twisted, his voice cracking as he tried to shout back, but the sound was swallowed by the fury of the crowd. Jasmine leaned forward, voice low, deliberate, impossible to ignore. "Sit down, Jim, because every second you stand there, you're not defending America. You're defending the rot that has left a generation in ruins." That was the strike. The chamber detonated in no's, students cheering, Democrats pounding their desks, even a few Republicans burying their faces in their hands. Jordan froze, eyes darting wildly, as if searching for an escape, before he finally grabbed his papers and stormed out, his footsteps echoing like the retreat of a broken man. The cameras tracked him the entire way, capturing every ounce of humiliation, broadcasting it into living rooms across America. For a moment, Jasmine stood alone at the center of the chaos, the chamber swirling around her like a battlefield she now commanded. And as the door slammed shut behind Jim Jordan, one question lingered like smoke in the air. How many more Republicans would crack under Jasmine's firestorm before the night was over? And how many would still be standing when history carved its verdict? The instant Jim Jordan stormed out, the media outside pounced like wolves catching the scent of blood. Within minutes, every major network had broken into programming, the chyron on CNN flashing in bold red. Gen Z confronts Trump. On Fox News, anchors scrambled. Voices sharpened as they tried to stitch together a narrative that painted the students as unruly agitators. MSNBC plastered Jasmine's face across the screen, her words playing on repeat. This isn't fake news. This is a national betrayal. Across Twitter, or X, as it now branded itself, a single hashtag exploded into global consciousness. #StolenFuture. The numbers were staggering. Viewership spiked in real time. Millions tuned in, flipping between channels, each side of the political divide claiming the footage as their own weapon. In some living rooms, parents watched with tears in their eyes as young graduates raised their voices. In others, Trump loyalists clenched their fists, shouting at their screens, furious that their champion had been branded a washed-up conman on live TV. The nation was no longer an audience, it was a jury, split down the middle, watching a trial unfold in the court of public opinion. Clips of Jasmine's exchange with Trump flooded timelines. On TikTok, the moment she said, "You are a washed-up conman afraid of a black woman with a spy" hit millions of views in under an hour, spliced with flashing edits, slow-motion zooms, and captions that turned her words into slogans. On Instagram, Reels showed students waving rejection letters in the air, their chants thundering under trending audio tracks. On YouTube, live streams of the hearing racked up hundreds of thousands of comments. Finally, someone speaks the truth. This is our 1980s recession all over again. Trump just got exposed. Inside the Capitol press room, reporters scrambled like it was election night. Headlines were written and rewritten in frantic bursts. Crockett versus Trump. The showdown America didn't see coming. Students unleash fury in Congress. The hashtag that could haunt Trump's campaign. #StolenFuture. The clattering of keyboards mixed with the steady hum of live commentary. Voices rushing to frame the narrative before it slipped from their hands. Meanwhile, Fox tried desperately to contain the fire. Pundits spun the uprising as staged, accusing Jasmine of orchestrating a political stunt. One commentator sneered into the camera, "This isn't democracy, it's mob rule." But as he spoke, the split screen showed Jasmine's calm, unwavering face, and on the other half the students' banners, "Our future is not for sale." The image undercut every word he spoke. Back in the chamber, Jasmine sat quietly at her desk, her eyes still locked on the papers before her. But outside those walls, she had become something else entirely. A symbol, a headline, a viral moment impossible to put back in the box. The roar of millions echoed through her silence, a tide rising that even she could not fully control. With America divided and the world watching, could Jasmine seize this chaos and shape it into a movement, or would the narrative slip away, rewritten by the very forces she stood against? As the chamber convulsed with shouting, the storm outside the Capitol grew into something uncontainable. The plaza was a sea of placards bobbing like waves, painted with words that cut straight to the bone. "Our future is not for sale. Jobs, not excuses. We are the 13.4%. Young graduates in caps and gowns stood shoulder to shoulder, their rejection letters stapled to poster boards like scarlet warnings. The chants rolled through the air with the force of a battle cry. "We are not lazy. We are abandoned." Parents began to arrive, some holding the hands of their children, others clutching photographs of sons and daughters buried under student debt with no path forward. Teachers, still wearing the dust of classrooms, raised their voices in unison, chanting alongside the students they had once taught. The sight was raw, unvarnished. America's generations fused into one demand for justice. The smell of sweat and ink from hastily written signs mixed with the heat rising off the asphalt, giving the air the sharp taste of urgency. Reporters wove through the crowd, microphones thrust forward, cameras capturing stories too painful to ignore. A mother held up her daughter's degree, the frame cracked from being pawned. "She graduated with honors," she said, her voice breaking, "and now she works part-time at a gas station. Is that the future this country promised?" Another man, a factory worker laid off after 20 years, stood beside his son. I gave my life to this country's labor force, and now my beau can't even get his first job. Tell me, who failed who? Every testimony added fuel to the fire, every story a wound broadcast left to millions at home. Above the roar, Jasmine's voice thundered again, not from the chamber but from the speakers set up by protesters outside. Her words, captured moments earlier and replayed on the loop, echoed through megaphones and reverberated against the marble steps of the Capitol. We are not lazy. We are abandoned, the crowd roared with each repetition, fists raised, the chant taking on the cadence of a promise, a warning, a revolution swelling in real time. Counter-protesters tried to break through, waving Trump banners, shouting fake news, and MAGA forever. Their chants collided with the voices of Gen Z, the plaza transforming into a battlefield of sound, to America's screaming across the same patch of ground. Police lines formed quickly, tension tightening like a noose. Reporters whispered into their live feeds, "This is no longer just a hearing. This is a movement." A war of voices shaking the Capitol steps. Inside, Jasmine sat stone-faced, but outside her words had escaped her control. They belonged to the people now, refracted through every phone screen, every sign, every cry of fury. And as the chants surged louder, the question gripping the nation was no longer whether the students would be heard, but whose truth the country would choose to believe. Would America rally behind Jasmine's raw, unflinching truth, or surrender once again to Trump's spin and the comforting lies of denial? As chants rumbled outside the Capitol and Jasmine's words ricocheted across every broadcast, Trump retreated to the only battlefield where he still held unchallenged power: the digital megaphone. Within minutes his social feed exploded with capital letters and exclamation points. Total witch hunt. Jasmine Crockett hates America. Radical Democrats are destroying your future. The posts spread like wildfire, shared across his loyal base, each echo feeding into an algorithm built on rage. Screens lit up red with fury, hashtags flipping from hashtag stolen future to hashtag witch hunt 20 to 5. GOP outlets follow in lockstep. Talk radio hosts thundered, their voices venomous, calling Jasmine a grandstanding socialist and branding the students in the gallery as paid agitators. Fox anchors leaned forward at their desks, eyes gleaming as they pushed the counter-narrative. This isn't about jobs. This is about Democrats staging a show trial to humiliate Donald Trump. Their graphics screamed with urgency. Crockett vs. America. Conservative columnists flooded op-eds overnight, painting Jasmine as the villain, accusing her of dividing the nation and exploiting vulnerable youth for political theater. But while the fury raged outside, inside the chamber Jasmine sat perfectly still, her composure unshaken, her hands folded neatly on the table. The cameras panned to her face, calm but sharp, her silence contrasting violently with Trump's digital outbursts that now crawled in real time across the bottom of every television screen. Finally, she leaned into the microphone, her voice low, steady, cutting through the nose with surgical precision. If telling the truth is hate, then maybe America needs more of it. The chamber fell silent, the words landing like a stone thrown into still water. The students in the gallery erupted again, chanting her name. Even reporters, sworn to neutrality, exchanged looks. They knew a viral moment had just been born. On social feeds, her quote was clipped, subtitled, and replayed on a loop, already transforming into a rallying cry. Memes plastered her face with the words in bold white letters, "America needs more truth." Trump's allies doubled down, their anger frantic, their voices rising higher as if volume alone could drown out the resonance of her calm. "This is outrageous," barked one congressman. "She's tearing the country apart," but every time they shouted, the networks cut back to Jasmine's quiet defiance, the visual contrast devastating. His fury looked unhinged, her composure looked presidential. In living rooms across the nation, Americans weren't just watching a debate, they were weighing to versions of reality, one of chaos and accusation, the other of steady conviction. It wasn't lost on anyone that for the first time, Trump seemed rattled, his rage reduced to nose, while Jasmine's voice cut like scripture. The gallery swelled with applause again, the chant surging with new life. Trump's hands slammed against his desk, but the microphones betrayed him with screeches. His face twisted in frustration, his outbursts now drowned beneath the echo of Jasmine's single line, replayed again and again. As Trump's fury spilled into static and slogans, Jasmine's calm conviction only grew louder. Could her steady fire withstand the hurricane of rage about to be unleashed beyond the Capitol walls? The gavel pounded for order, but the chamber had already slipped into chaos. Trump's face glistened with sweat, his jaw quivering with fury. Then, with a crack that echoed through the microphones, he slammed both fists against the desk. Papers leapt into the air, pens clattered to the floor. His veins bulged across his neck, his voice thundering as he roared into the microphone. Enough. The word reverberated through the chamber like an explosion, rattling even the marble walls. But Jasmine didn't recoil. She stepped forward, her heels clicking on the stone like war drums, her eyes locked onto him with the precision of a sniper. Her voice sliced through the tempest, cool, sharp, and merciless. Scream louder, Mr. Trump. It won't drown the truth. The gallery erupted, students leaping to their feet, their cheers rolling like a tidal wave. Their roar shook the rafters, the chant of truth, 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 engulfing the chamber until Trump's red-faced fury looked like a desperate man trying to stop a flood with his bare hands. He pointed at Jasmine, his hand trembling, his words stammering but venomous. You are an embarrassment, to this chamber, to this country. To yourself. The insult cracked, but it rang hollow, his voice fraying, his control slipping further with every syllable. Jasmine didn't wait for the echo to fade. She tilted her head, eyes narrowed, and let her retort strike like lightning. Deader an embarrassment than a disgrace. Her words landed with the weight of a gavel slamming final judgment. The chamber gasped, the gallery roared. Reporters scrambled to send the quote flashing across newswires in real time. On screens across America, chyron after chyron lit up. Crockett fires back, better an embarrassment than a disgrace. Trump's fury curdled into something darker. His voice cracked as he tried to speak again, but the crowd drowned him out, the chants rising until he was no longer a president commanding order, but a man howling into a void. His fists hammered the desk again, the sound desperate, hollow, an animal thrashing in a cage. His allies shouted in vain, their words lost in the roar. Even Fox cameras cut briefly to his face, a man once feared, now flailing, stripped of command before millions. Jasmine stood her ground, her breathing steady, her silhouette illuminated by the blazing lights. She didn't need to say another word, her silence was lethal. Every second she remained calm while he unraveled deep in the contrast, searing the image into the nation's memory. Trump, veins bulging, reduced to a caricature of rage, while Jasmine, unflinching, looked like the embodiment of control. The chamber had shifted. The air was thicker, charged, dangerous. Trump's unraveling was no longer just political theater. It was something darker, a man consumed by fury, teetering at the edge of implosion. Every camera, every pair of eyes was locked on him, waiting, watching, wondering how much further he could fall before he shattered completely. Would Trump's fury simply humiliate him, or was the world about to witness a complete breakdown of a man who once held the most powerful office on earth? The roar of the chamber had barely dimmed when Jasmine reached beneath her desk and pulled out a folder marked with a red tab, not numbers this time, but words, raw and damning. She held it high so the cameras could see, her voice tightening like a coil ready to snap. You want to talk about embarrassment, Mr. Trump? Let's talk about betrayal. With a flick of her wrist, she spread the pages across the monitor screens towering above the chamber. The room fell silent as the words appeared in black and white. Internal memos from the Trump administration, stamped and dated, outlining cuts to job training, youth apprenticeship programs, and federal grants for workforce development. Gasps ripped through the chamber like a wave. Reporters scrambled, pens scratching furiously, cameras flashing so rapidly the chamber lit up like a thunderstorm. Students in the gallery leaned forward, their mouths open, eyes wide as the reality of their stolen opportunities glowed in front of them. The documents didn't whisper, they screamed. Lines highlighted in yellow bled across the screen, recommend elimination of youth workforce investment program, defund career readiness grants effective immediately, shift resources away from youth training programs toward corporate tax incentives. Trump's face drained of color. He gripped the edge of the desk, his knuckles trembling as his voice sputtered, breaking under the weight of exposure. This is fake, these are fabricated. A setup by Democrats, but the denial faltered. His eyes betrayed him as they flickered up at the glowing screens, the signatures unmistakable, the ink carrying his own name. Jasmine seized the moment, her voice slicing through the chamber. every word a blade. You signed their future away with your pen. These cuts weren't mistakes. They weren't oversights, they were choices. Choices you made to favor corporations and cronies over the sons and daughters of this nation. Choices that killed dreams before they had the chance to live. And tonight, America sees the receipts. The chamber erupted in shouts. Democrats pounded their desks, their voices rising with indignation. GOP lawmakers scrambled, some shouting for order, others burying their faces in their hands as the images blazed across every screen in America. The students thundered in the gallery, their chants deafening now, not just anger but vindication. You cut us down, you cut us down. Their voices shook the rafters, every syllable another nail hammered into Trump's defenses. Trump tried again, his voice cracking, his words disjointed, desperate. It was for the good of the economy, for growth, but his excuses sounded hollow, brittle, collapsing under the weight of undeniable evidence. The documents, projected larger than life, drowned him out. His once commanding voice was reduced to stammers, fragments, a man cornered by his own record. Jasmine stood taller, her eyes unyielding, her voice steady, iron-willed. You didn't just fail them, you betrayed them. You turned your back on a generation and sold them out for profit. And no amount of shouting, no amount of denial will erase what you signed away. The chamber hung in stunned silence for a beat, the tension so thick it seemed the air itself might shatter. If this is what Jasmine has already unearthed, what darker truths still lie buried in Trump's record, waiting to erupt into the light? The chamber fractured into chaos the moment Jasmine's words and the leaked memo seared across the screens. GOP leaders erupted, their voices clashing in a cacophony of denial and outrage. Some pounded their desks, demanding the evidence be stricken from the record, while others shouted over one another, trying desperately to drown out the images that refused to disappear. Democrats rose to their feet, clapping and jeering, their voices feeding the storm. The chairman's gavel cracked again and again, but the sound was swallowed whole, useless against the tidal wave of no's. The students in the gallery only grew louder, their chants hammering in rhythm, banners waving above their heads. You cut us down, you cut us down, the sound carried like thunder, rolling over every attempt at order. Reporters leaned forward in their seats, their eyes darting between the flashing monitors and the spectacle unfolding on the floor, aware that this was history, not written in ink, but shouted in rage. In the middle of the storm, Jasmine stood unmoved. She rose above the noise not with volume, but with clarity. She leaned into the microphone, her voice slicing through the chamber like a siren's call. You cannot silence the truth of a generation robbed. Her words reverberated across the hall, amplified by the chaos, impossible to ignore. The students erupted in wild applause. Democrats pounded their desks. Even a handful of Republicans sat stone-faced, unable to mask the cracks forming in their own ranks. Then the camera swung to Trump. For the first time that night, he wasn't standing tall or shouting over the storm. He slumped back into his chair, his shoulders sagging, his jaw slack. The man who once commanded rallies of tens of thousands, who thrived in the role of unshakable strongman, suddenly looked smaller under the glare of the lights. His eyes flickered, darting across the room as if searching for an escape that wasn't there. The strongest man in the chamber now looked weak, his aura of dominance stripped bare by evidence, by chance, by the relentless force of Jasmine's defiance. The spectacle electrified the room. Students pointed from the gallery, jeering at the sight of him diminished. Reporters whispered, their pens racing to capture the collapse in real time. Even the chairman hesitated, his gavel resting midair, as though he to recognize that order had already been lost. Jasmine seized the silence that followed, her presence burning brighter than the storm. She straightened her spine, her hand pressed firmly against the scattered memos, her voice steady, deliberate, unforgiving. This is not just about policies or programs, this is about betrayal. This is about a generation denied their future so one man could feed his pride. And now, he must answer not just to us, but to them, and to history. The chamber froze, every pair of eyes flicking between the woman standing tall and the man slumped low, the balance of power shifting visibly in real time. Was this the moment Jasmine Crockett would strike the final blow, the moment the myth of Trump's strength shattered for good, live before a nation that could no longer look away? The storm of shouting collapsed into an eerie quiet as Jasmine leaned forward, her voice calm but heavy with precision. Mr. Trump, explain to the American people why you signed away the future of their children. The words hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Cameras zoomed in, framing his face in brutal close-up, every bead of sweat magnify, every twitch of his jaw broadcast live. Trump opened his mouth, then shut it again. His lips moved, but no sound came. The seconds began to stretch, each tick of the clock amplifying the silence. 10 seconds, 15, 20. Millions at home counted with bated breath, their screens capturing the unthinkable. Donald Trump, the man who once filled arenas with endless bluster, frozen in place, paralyzed before a single question. The students in the gallery leaned forward, their banners trembling in their hands. Reporters stopped writing, their pens suspended midair. Even his Republican allies shifted in their seats, the panic in their eyes betraying what they could not say aloud. The strongest voice in American politics had gone silent, and the silence was deafening. Jasmine didn't let the moment pass. She stepped closer, her voice cutting through the vacuum like a blade through glass. America deserves better. The words landed with the force of a hammer, echoing through the chamber and out across every screen. The crowd gasped, the sound sharp, collective, as if the entire nation exhaled at once. Trump remained motionless, his hands gripping the desk, his eyes darting, his body slumped under the weight of exposure. The cameras captured everything, his lips trembling, his eyes narrowing, the slow collapse of a man who had built his empire on words now betrayed by silence. Jasmine stood tall beside him, her calm composure amplifying his unraveling, her voice the only one that mattered in a chamber suddenly stripped of noise. For a man who weaponized words his entire life, was this silence his greatest defeat? The moment America saw power itself stripped bare, live and unfiltered. Trump's silence still hung in the air, like a heavy fog, when Jasmine turned away from him, her shoulders squared, her gaze lifting not toward the chamber but toward the cameras, the country, the millions glued to their screens. Her voice was clear, resonant, each word deliberate. This is not about party lines. This is about your children, your neighbors, your future. The cameras panned across the gallery. Students clutched their torn resumes, their eyes glistening with tears yet burning with hope. A mother in the crowd pressed a photograph of her daughter to her chest, her shoulders shaking. A father wiped his eyes, his hands calloused from decades of labor that now seemed meaningless, as his son sat jobless at home. Teachers in worn blazers stood shoulder to shoulder with their former students, chanting softly, their voices trembling but steadying with every word Jasmine spoke. Inside the chamber, the transformation was palpable. It no longer felt like a sterile hearing room. It felt like a rally ground, the heartbeat of a movement pounding through its walls. The chants from the gallery picked up once more, but this time they carried a different rhythm, less anger, more resolve, a chant that felt like the beginning of something larger than the moment. Reporters stopped scribbling and simply stared, their lenses capturing not just testimony, but the ignition of history. Jasmine stepped closer to the edge of the platform, her hand gripping the microphone as though it were the torch of truth itself. For years we've been told to wait, to be patient, to accept less than we deserve. But no more. This generation will not be erased. This nation will not be sold, and if the truth shakes these walls tonight, then let them shake, because silence has already stolen too much from us. The gallery erupted, their chants merging into a single cry that seemed to rattle even the stone pillars. Outside, the crowd swelled, their voices echoing the same words back through the screens and speakers. For a moment, the divide between chamber and street collapsed. America itself seemed to breathe in unison, caught between grief and defiance. Could Jasmine transform that pain into power, forging not just a moment of outrage but a movement strong enough to rewrite the future of a nation? The chamber thundered with chants, the air so heavy it felt combustible. Trump's face twisted, his voice raw, desperate, clawing for control one last time. He leaned into the microphone, his words spat like venom. You are nothing, Jasmine, a disgrace, a fraud. A pathetic mouthpiece for radicals who hate this country. The insult sliced the chamber like a jagged blade, shocking even his own allies with its naked fury. But Jasmine didn't flinch, she stood tall, her silhouette sharp against the glowing monitors still flashing his damning record. Her voice cut clean through the storm, calm but blazing with conviction. You can curse me, you can belittle me, but you cannot erase me. Each word landed like a gavel striking judgment, her tone unshakable, her eyes locked on him with the steadiness of a soldier refusing to bow. For a breathless second, silence gripped the chamber, the kind that cools before an explosion. Then it came, a deafening roar of applause, cheers crashing down from the gallery, Democrats pounding their desks, even some independents rising to their feet. The sound was overwhelming, a tidal wave of defiance and affirmation that drowned Trump's sputtering fury into nothing more than static. He shouted again, but his voice was buried, lost under the earthquake of voices celebrating the woman who refused to bend. Reporters captured it instantly, their words already being typed into headlines. Crockett stands unshaken. The night Trump was silenced, social feeds lit up with Jasmine's words in bold text, plastered across memes, protest signs, and breaking news chirons. Millions watched as the image froze on their screens, Trump, hunched and raging, while Jasmine stood unmovable, a symbol of resilience etched against chaos. The power in the room had shifted, irreversibly. Trump looked smaller now, not the giant who once dominated stages, but a man diminished, his last weapon blunted against an opponent who refused to bend or break. Jasmine had not just survived his wrath, she had absorbed it, transformed it, and thrown it back at him, until his fury collapsed under its own weight. In that moment, as the chamber shook with her defiance and Trump's voice dissolved into irrelevance, one question burned across the nation. Had Jasmine Crockett just redrawn America's political battlefield forever? Across the nation, the aftershocks rippled like an earthquake. Newsrooms buzzed with urgency, anchors locked into breaking coverage, split screens replaying the moment Trump was drowned out by thunderous applause while Jasmine stood unshaken. CNN branded it the silence that shook Washington. Fox scrambled into damage control, their hosts branding it a stage ambush, yet their nervous tones betrayed how hard the moment had struck. Twitter X erupted overnight. Hashtags like #CrockettUnbroken and #TrumpSilence trended globally, drowning timelines in clips, memes, and battle lines drawn in real time. In living rooms, the divide cut deep. Parents huddled on couches, voices raised as they debated not just Jasmine's words, but their children's futures. A mother in Ohio choked back tears telling her husband she saw her son's unemployment in Jasmine's charts. A father in Texas shook his head, muttering that Trump had finally lost his fire. Across campuses, students gathered around phones and projectors, their chants echoing Jasmine's defiance. "You cannot erase us." For the first time in years, they felt the chamber had not dismissed them but carried their voice into history. Pollsters scrambled to release snap surveys before dawn. Numbers flickered across chirons, Trump's approval dipping sharply, Jasmine's recognition soaring. In just hours, the story had mutated from a televised clash into a national reckoning. Late-night comedians tore into Trump's meltdown, while morning talk shows booked panels of economists, students, and weary parents to ask one question: had America just witnessed the breaking of an era? And yet, not all was celebration. MAGA loyalists took to their echo chambers, painting Jasmine as an angry radical, flooding forums with threats and conspiracy spins, but even there, cracks appeared. Some conservatives admitted, quietly, hesitantly, that Trump had looked weaker than ever, unable to withstand the simplest challenge without unraveling. America was no longer just watching, it was participating, choosing sides, taking Jasmine's words into classrooms, kitchen tables, union halls, and church pews. The moment no longer belonged only to Congress, it belonged to the people, and they would decide whether it marked revolution or spectacle. As the dust settled, one question echoed across screens and streets alike: was this the night Jasmine Crockett turned the tide of American politics, or just another flash of fire soon swallowed by the chaos? The roar of the chamber still lingered in her ears as Jasmine closed the door of her modest D.C. apartment. The world outside was chaos: news alerts, chants from the streets, endless commentary, but inside, there was silence, heavy and intimate. On her kitchen table lay a stack of letters and emails printed by her staff. Each envelope carried the handwriting of desperation, the digital ink of voices ignored too long. She hesitated before opening the first, as though bracing for a punch. The words cut deeper than any insult Trump had thrown. A 19-year-old from Detroit wrote of watching his father lose his job and his mother collapse under medical bills. A girl from Arizona confessed she had dropped out of college, not from lack of will but because tuition buried her in debt before she could even begin. Another, barely 16, scribbled in shaky handwriting, "I don't want to give up, but I don't know if I have a future left. Jasmine's hands trembled. For a moment, the armor she wore in public cracked, and tears blurred the page. She pressed the letter to her chest as if by holding it close she could shield that young voice from the cruelty of indifference. The camera of imagination zooms in on her face, damp with tears, but then something shifts. She straightens, her breathing slows, a flicker of fire rekindles in her eyes. She whispers into the silence, not for the cameras, not for Congress, but for herself. This fight is only beginning. They will not be forgotten, not while I have breath. She takes a pen and begins scribbling notes, not policy points or speeches, but promises. Promises to the faces behind the words, to the broken and the beaten, to the ones who dared to believe enough to write to her. With every stroke of ink, her grief hardens into steel. The warrior returns, not in the Capitol's glare, but in the quiet sanctity of a small apartment where one woman refuses to collapse beneath the weight of millions. She knows tomorrow the battle resumes, fiercer than before. She knows Trump and his allies will come for her with everything they have left. But tonight, in the silence, she accepts the burden fully. And as Jasmine Crockett sets her jaw against the storm, the question hangs over America. Like a blade, can a single woman bear the weight of an entire generation's broken future, or will the fight consume her before victory is won? The chamber had fallen into a hush so complete that even the cameras seemed to hold their breath. Jasmine stood at the center, not as a politician sparring with rivals, but as a voice carrying the weight of a fractured generation. Her eyes locked directly on the camera lens, on the millions watching, not just across America, but around the world. The fury of debate, the chaos of partisanship, the venom of Trump's last insult, all of it evaporated in this moment. What remained was raw truth. Her voice rang steady, every word cutting like steel against silence. America cannot degrade if its youth are abandoned. But greatness can be rebuilt, not for Trump, not for parties, not for power, but for us. For every worker laid off, every parent broken by impossible choices, every child told their dreams cost too much. You are not forgotten. You are the reason I fight. The screen split in quick flashes, faces of students with tear-streaked cheeks, parents clutching their children, workers in shuttered factories watching from break rooms lit by flickering televisions. Their eyes met Jasmine's across the distance, and something unspoken passed between them. Belief. Reporters in the press gallery stopped typing, transfixed. On the streets outside the Capitol, megaphones carried her words, each sentence echoing back in chants that rose like a drumbeat. Our future is not for sale. The chant swelled, first a ripple, then a roar, as though the nation itself had found its lost voice. To each viewer one-on-one, this story doesn't end here. It ends in your homes, in your classrooms, in your choices tomorrow and the day after. Do not wait for permission. Demand change. Demand dignity. Demand a future that belongs to you. The screen dimmed to black, but the chant continued. Relentless, vibrating with a defiance too loud to silence. The final words linger in white across the darkness. Our future is not for sale. As millions replay Jasmine's closing message, will history remember this night as the spark that lit a revolution, or as the warning America ignored too late? History does not belong to the powerful, it belongs to those who dare to rise when hope feels lost. Jasmine's fight is not just hers, it is every parent struggling to feed their child, every student wondering if their future still matters, every worker told their worth is disposable. Tonight, her courage lights a path for all of us, a reminder that America's promise is not written by one man's pen, but by millions of voices refusing to be erased. When your moment comes, will you stay silent, or will you rise and speak for the future? Thank you for watching until this moment, and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.